Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm Abercrombie and Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It's not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. We are back after somewhat of a long hiatus. With me is, of course, the Superman himself, Sam Sanchez. How you doing, Sam?
Not too bad. The Robin to your Batman.
And with us, as we I guess teased many months ago, but have not brought her on yet, Nida Wood. Thank you, Nida, for joining us.
Thanks.
Wonder Woman on the set.
By far the smartest one of the three of us, with an IQ that doubles both me and Sam put together. So
agreed.
The creation.
Well, I don't even know where to begin. No, I kind of know where to begin, but it's been a while since we talked, and there's been a lot of stuff that's happened since we've talked. We can go macro or more tailored if you want. But Johnny and Amber, I don't know where were we with Johnny and Amber when we last left off. I think we were obviously verdict.
Yeah, we were following it. We hadn't really heard what was going to happen. Everybody was waiting with bated breath to figure out who was going to pay who.
Well, Amber, ouch. She not only lost her shirt, but she also lost her acting career, I think, too, as a result of all of those shenanigans.
Yeah, talk about two people that, I don't know that public opinion is really going to help either one of them. I don't know that either one of them has a career much left in film after that. But the funnier thing will be to see if Johnny ever sees a dollar. Any bets on that one?
I doubt it.
I'm not going to see anything probably. But he seems to be doing much better in the public than she seems to be doing with his career aspects and progress moving forward.
Is Johnny going to get his likeness back on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland? That's the real question. Is he going to get his name, or his picture on the big pirate at the end of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride? Because when they took that down, that was a major blow.
Yeah, I think once Disney came out and said, he'll never appear in another one of the franchise movies, and they have like 3 in the works, which is crazy. How much more could you take pirates and zombies? I think he's done with that franchise.
I get why he did it. I mean, just from a career standpoint. I mean, obviously with the Me Too movement and the harassment and the violence and the stuff like that, Hollywood's on like massive edge for I mean, if you want my personal opinion, I think Hollywood's had a kind of a condoning, look the other way attitude towards domestic violence and different things that have gone on for a number of years. So then whenever it got exposed, I think they went hyper reactionary in the opposite direction. And then they started canceling people that maybe haven't had their issue adjudicated yet and maybe weren't guilty. So that's what happened to Johnny Depp. I think he got thrown off of the J.K. Rowling movie with the Dumbledore movie. He got thrown out of that, which he lost millions of dollars on that one. And
I agree. I think that's what happened. But even if they want him back, I don't think he would be wanting to go back at this point after what happened to him.
Yeah, and to Nida's point, I think that the street cred that he did pick up was one he's a much more sympathetic character than I think before he went into the trial. Before he went into the trial, he had kind of this whole hated, he's a wife beater, he's weird, and he is weird. Let's just be frank. But he rehabbed that portion, and I think the recordings, the testimony, he was able to show maybe I wasn't innocent, but I was a victim at times where you guys were just trying to paint me with one colored paintbrush. And so to Nida's point in the court of PR, it was really a stroke of genius because he was dead. I think his career was dead. I think he was really not moving forward, and he was able to revive, at least his heart's beating, right? So where he goes and what direction will be interesting, but he's at least, regained some footing.
Yeah, I think he came off as a normal person, admitting his mistakes and understanding and explaining. He wasn't perfect, but at the same time, he also didn't deserve maybe what had happened to him. Unlike Amber, who just seems like she's blame shifting the entire time, seemed kind of unrealistic the way her controversial stories were being displayed and coming out during cross direct examination.
So Johnny's reputation is salvaged, and Amber is known as a lady who poops in the bed, right? I guess that's where we ended, right? And her career, for lack of a better word, is probably done. I think she lost the role on the sequel to Aquaman or something like that. I don't think she's going to be doing that anymore, and I think she's probably toast at this point as far as Hollywood goes.
Yeah, I would agree.
I agree.
Then she's now she's the butt of the psychotic ex-wife jokes, right?
But
Anyway, okay, so do we want to talk about our favorite pop star, Sam? We love her.
Can we not? We can't pass her over.
We can't go an episode. We can't go an episode without talking about our girl Britney.
I mean, if it's not for naked Instagrams and running off to do crazy things, like what else is there not to talk about? Like Britney remarried,
both running off and doing naked Instagrams. So she's now graduated from just the naked Instagrams to going on vacation and doing naked Instagrams. So I got to hand it Britney living her best life.
Well, the thing that I was really impressed with was, they talked a lot about, was she going to, now that she's free of the guardianship, was she going to go back out on tour? Is she going back into the studio? Is she going to sign up to do, a stint in Vegas? And apparently it's all of those. It's all of those. So, now that the leash is off, she feels like, hey, let's turn the spigot back on. Because I'm sure she spent a lot of money between paying for everybody's attorney's fees and the honeymoon. She's going to need to get back to work.
I would think that comeback tour would easily for her would be $50 or $75 million that she'd get out of that. If she decided to book 10 or 20 cities, I bet you she could pull 50 or 75 million out of it. I mean, everybody would go to see her. Everybody go to see her.
Yeah,
I'd go to see her.
Yeah, I did go see her, and she's actually really good when I was in Vegas several years ago. So I guess it's all about what she wants to do and her individuality and what she wants to pursue as not being under a guardianship anymore.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, I think she's been cooped up for so long she couldn't do anything. She missed like the whole, front side of the phenomenon of social media, and I think she's just making up for lost time. I mean, quite frankly.
Well, the funny thing with Britney to me is that, she really has embraced social media, but she does like the same four things. She figured out really quickly, like, hey, people love to watch me twirl around. People love to see me naked. People love to see me toss my hair. If I do those three things and just kind of mix it up depending on the day, I'll just keep adding, this Instagram presence or whatever, this TikTok presence, whoever it is. But I agree, Nida. I think that she's actually a tremendous performer. It would be interesting to see like now the legal dynamic, because, you know, one of the things that I think that really is that common thread that I just want to touch on between Johnny Depp and his legal troubles and Britney and her legal troubles is the legal teams that got these people out of the messes. I'm gonna tell you what, like there's some brilliant lawyers that came into both of those camps that did some phenomenal work. And in Johnny's case, just to backstep half, you know, his lawyer won. He won the Hot Lawyer Award. Like she came in and she smiled, and she was really not the best oralist, but I will tell you, like she presented very well. She was good on camera. So whoever decided to put her in the lead, brilliant lawyering. Second, on Britney's case, the guy who came in and said, "Hey, look, all lawyers that you've had in the past really sucked. I'm going to come in, you know, late in the game, but I'm going to fix it for you." He's done an amazing job. Now, whether or not she surrounded herself with that type of legal entourage to protect her from things going forward, it's going to be interesting because, you know, every once in a while she still does some crazy things that I'm like, before now, when she was in the guardianship, people would look at her and be like, "Oh, you need to still be in the guardianship. Look at all the stuff you're doing." And now it's just like, "Oh, that's just eclectic Britney," you know. So it's just this interesting shift that lawyers have figured out how to sway this court of public opinion to really kind of mold somebody into a different person than who they were before, even though they're the exact same person, really with the same behaviors.
Yeah,
It's
agreed.
not
I
even
think
the no, it's
I
not
was
even just the lawyering, it's the PR team that went along with the lawyering, I think, that really rehab these images.
definitely, and I think it's a lot about preparation. I mean, Camille Vasquez had some exhibit or some kind of video or some kind of clip for every single question she would ask Amber. Just, you know, catch her in a lie, show what really happened, show the picture that she wanted to show the jury and to the public regarding her story and what they wanted to present regarding Johnny Depp's case.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
I think preparation is very important.
Yeah, I would agree. Which takes us into one of the things that, I mean, I know we're going to talk about. Obviously, there's been some landmark legal decisions since the last time we were all together talking that we want to touch on. But I think that's another piece of what we're seeing. You know, if you talk about like legal strategy and true trial strategy, and whether it's, you know, if you're doing an oral, you know, to the Court of Appeals, or you're in front of a trial court, like that preparation and kind of the story that you're telling is really going to determine the outcome in a lot of cases. It's not always the facts that you present or the facts that you get in. It's the way you tell the story with the facts that you do have and that you do get to present. And so I think both of those cases are very, you know, highlight real moments for those people in their careers as far as doing a good job.
I agree.
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll hit the not controversial topic of the landmark Supreme Court decision of Roe versus Wade being overturned, 50-year, you know, precedent being overturned, and, you know, obviously what that means and what that doesn't mean. I know everyone thinks it's the, you know, the return of I don't know, the return of you know, I don't know, the return of the end of the world, the apocalypse or whatever. I mean, the real crux of the decision that most people seem to be missing is that the Supreme Court makes a ruling that overturning the 1972 decision of Roe versus Wade. In that ruling, they basically state that, okay, it's not up to the federal government to make a law dealing with this particular issue, and we thought it was an overreach when they did it in 1972. So we're turning this over to the states to let each state decide how they want to handle their abortion law. So, you know, if you're California, you're going to have a different law than Kansas or Texas or wherever. And I know that's, you know, I know it's a huge issue for people, and I know that it's highly controversial. You know, there's it's such a unique. It's much more unique than any other controversial social decisions, because you're talking about a human life. Either way, whether it's the mother or the baby, you're talking about a human life either way, and you're talking about a person's rights either way. So, and that's what makes it super unique versus other types of, you know, social cases that can go before the Supreme Court. But in essence, you know, the crux of the decision is They didn't even say Congress couldn't make a law. They just basically said that the Supreme Court overreached in making that original determination, and it has to go back to the states for each state to make its own determination. Which, interestingly enough, was Ruth Bader Ginsburg's warning, and kind of basically it was her. She did an interview once before she died, and talked about how if Roe was going to get overturned, that's the kind of slippery slope it was on, because of the way it was handled, and whether it was or was not a judicial overreach. So I hear so many people just out there talking about it being a precedent, a precedent, a precedent. You don't overturn precedents and this and that. Well, the Supreme Court overturns precedents all the time. 219 times, I think they've overturned a precedent. I mean, the segregation decisions were 50-year legal precedents, and nobody disputes that those shouldn't have been overturned. So, all that said, your state, take more care in electing your state representatives or whoever you have deciding your state law, because that's who's going to make your abortion decisions from now on. That's it.
So lots of feelings and thoughts on that. It's, I guess, from a woman's perspective, it's difficult because you have your moral thoughts on what you think is right and what you think is wrong with respect to a fetus, and what you think you should do or not do when it comes to a fetus, and what's okay and what's not okay morally and as a decision for your family. So, that's one thing. But then on the other flip side, I don't think it's up to a government to decide what you should be doing or not be doing with what may be best for your family, for your own body, for a child. I mean, I feel like there's lots of situations where it's, maybe you're extremely excited to have a baby, something goes wrong, maybe it's not born with any vital organs, and at that point, what do you do? And then you're stuck in this horrible position where you're potentially in a red state like we are, and the laws are, you can't do anything about it. You're in medical danger and you can't do anything about it. So it's just very difficult, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Nida touches on a lot of things. So do you, Bryan. First of all, to say that the court reverses precedent a lot, I think, is an overreach, right?
219 times.
Do it. They've done it. Yeah, in the course of the entire history of the Supreme Court. In the modern era, they haven't done it that often. They've done it maybe 4 times. And the problem that this presents, I think, for a lot of people is when you're talking about something that's an established fundamental right, it'd be like the Supreme Court saying, hey, by the way, slavery is okay. We made a mistake about that because we overreached our authority to be able to determine that that's a fundamental right. And that's landmark. That's what I think has everybody so fired up. And I do agree with you, Bryan. I think that was, Ginsburg's warning to say, like, hey, if this is the argument, then you can apply that logic, that legal reasoning to anything that the court has done beyond the purview of what the government has done. And that's an interesting argument to me. I think, as an attorney, when you sit down and you think about it and you say, well, so they overturned it, Congress can act, and they can. But what I think that does is it sets them up for a fight again on the exact same issue. You're going to have 50 states with 50 different rules that vary from nothing to everything. And so, when you talk about, is it in the heart of that argument for me is it really
I apologize.
Right?
I stand corrected. I think it was only reversed. There's only been 145 reversals, not 219. So I apologize.
Okay, you're all right.
I don't want to hear the commentary that we're going to get from this, that oh, you got your facts wrong. So
your email is going to blow up, man. I just want you to know. But I mean, so those are the things that I do think that that the court wrestles with, and it's just been such a long time for the court to kind of deal. They've been on the outskirts of this issue for such a long time, but they've been on the outskirts of a lot of these kinds of issues. And I think that you're right, Bryan. The right to vote is a very powerful thing that people, I think, as a country, we really take for granted. I think the only time most people go out to vote is when it's a presidential election, or maybe when, there's a really heated governor's race. For the most part, the people who are actually passing fundamental laws and ordinances that govern our everyday lives, very few people vote in those elections. And if they do, they don't know who the hell they are.
Yeah,
They look at the ballot and
do
they
you
just
one
kind of
better
go,
and say, how many people can name their state representative or state senator? I mean, and that, they can name they can probably name their U.S. House member or their senator and probably the governor, but do they even know who the who the local officials are?
Well, and even if they could name them, could they name what their politics are? Could they name how they stand on certain issues? No way. No way. And that's really what the court is kind of, I think, trying to tell the people, is to say, if you want it, fine, go get it, go make it happen. But we did it way back then and we shouldn't have. Is that right? I think that I've never been for somebody on the bench to legislate. I feel like the checks and balances of the system that we set up is very important. And so when the court does overreach, I feel like it's detrimental to the overall, level of democracy that the United States enjoys. However, I think there are times where that's the whole reason the court is there, is to protect some inalienable rights that everyone should have. Is this one that women should have? I'm a proponent of, no one should be able to tell me what to do with my body, period. That's just how I feel. And I think, women should have the same right. Now, whether or not that's going to be where you live, you can't in Texas, but you can in Massachusetts. I think, there's just inherent craziness to that logic, and to think that that's going to make things better, or, can we fix it? Well, hell, we can't agree on whether or not the election actually happened correctly, for the president. So are we going to be able to determine something like that? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. The future holds a lot of pitfalls and bear traps that we're going to see if we can avoid.
Well, I feel like I'm the odd man out in this particular situation, because I'm a proponent of, I agree, your body's your body. You have the right to do whatever you want with it. But what about that other body that's inside of you that has, that should have some rights, should have some, I think Ronald Reagan said that it wasn't, nobody who's ever been aborted is in favor of abortion. So, which is simple logic, but it is. So, and look, to Nida's point, I 100% agree with you. There's all kinds of complications and things like that people have to deal with in horrible situations. But I mean, pregnancy crisis centers, for example, they outnumber abortion clinics 3-1. And there's options for people. There's things like that. I think if you're talking about an inalienable right and a fundamental right of a human being, the right to life is probably the first one. So the baby didn't ask to be conceived. The baby didn't ask to be, brought into this world. Your actions did that. And so, obviously I'm okay with exceptions for rape and incest and things like that. But I mean, I have 2 adopted children. I put my money where my mouth is where this is concerned. So, my position is always going to be for life.
And 100% on, that's when I was talking about moral decisions, and morally where you stand is one thing. And 100% I agree with you, but at the same time, I don't think there are any exceptions for those other instances, rape, or what if you didn't do anything, and what if your body just miscarried and now you can't even get medication to help safely abort this baby, this fetus, this isn't even living, and you have to undergo unsafe procedures, travel to a different state to even take care of that, which that's the issue, is that with this type of policy, who knows when these exceptions are going to come into place, or if they are going to come into place. And that's the issue that I guess I have with it.
Sure. Yeah, that's completely understandable. And those are obviously reasonable discussions. I think where this thing got out of whack, I think, honestly, my view of the whole abortion debate has been, I think there was this kind of area that we were in for probably like about 20 years, maybe after the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case, where everybody was kind of okay with it or could live with it when it was, first trimester, that sort of thing, whenever there was some limitations on it. I think where everything went off the rails I think whenever they started doing the abortions up to birth, I think there's a proposal in California that you can't do it, that you could theoretically kill your child after it's born, and they can't do anything about it. I think those kinds of quote unquote choice abortion and partial birth abortion and abortions at the very, very late term, which everyone's like, oh, they're rare, they're rare, they're rare, but they're still available under law. I mean, when you're talking about a viable human life, like I said, I think the overreach is what caused this reaction, quite frankly. I think it was kind of the left that did it, because I think the overreach on pushing this as far as they could possibly push it, I think caused the reaction in the opposite direction. I think, like I said, for years and years and years, the first trimester, first, second trimester kind of thing was kind of where everybody kind of lived, and everybody just kind of accepted it. And then, the push and push and push all the way up to the moment of consent, the moment of birth, or 3 hours before birth, or abortion on demand at any time. That I think New York passed that law, and I think California passed that law. And after that, I think it got everybody thinking about what that actually entails and what that looks like. So,
well, we're definitely a country of pendulums, right? We like to swing right, and we very rarely swing or stay long in the middle. I agree with you, Bryan. The thing that I think is gonna really, that has invigorated this argument across that line even further is states criminalizing support of this. So a state saying, hey, if you leave from my state and you go to another state to have this done and we find out about it, or somebody helps you, then we're criminalizing that support. And that's what I'm talking about when I say that, a free-for-all within the country in
I would be
relation
shocked if that
to
that actually happened, because it's such a personal decision either way.
I mean, but it's on the books. I guarantee you that in a conservative state, a deep red state, there will be a criminal of
I don't think
there's no way that somebody crafts that law and says, hey, I'm going to put it on the books, and then say, but I'm not really ever going to use it. It's just like a gun that I keep in my pocket. It's loaded, but I'm never going to pull it out, point it, and try to shoot it. That's just not going to happen. That's not the way we deal with these types of issues in states like that. And it doesn't matter. It could be the left side. To your point, Bryan, you're saying, hey, what inspired these types of reactions, this law, this ruling from the court, was these states out there saying it can happen at this later point in time, right before birth. That is killing somebody. Somebody's actually obviously alive, because if they were medically able to be born at that time, they would survive. So that absolutely is taking somebody's life. Now we're switching it the other way and saying, well, they'll never prosecute this. No way. They're absolutely going to utilize the law, because what I'm talking about, that pendulum of legality that we're using right now, it's absolutely going to be something that we're going to end up talking about through this, obviously on the podcast, but we're absolutely going to see it play out in the courtrooms for sure. No doubt.
Well, there's already lawsuits filed over various states' abortion laws, how restrictive or less restrictive they are. I think Kansas had a vote last night where they were on their constitution was a decision to allow or disallow abortion. They allowed it by a fairly substantial margin. I'm not sure exactly what the parameters of the amendment were, but whether that was all abortions are illegal or just certain ones, life of the mother exceptions, those sorts of things. But it won. But obviously, it won the right to abort your or the right to abort your child won pretty substantially in Kansas last night. So I mean, every state's going to be different, but every law that I've seen about prosecuting abortion providers and things, there's always been the provider. It hasn't been the mother. Which a lot of these mothers, I mean, a lot of the pro-life folks will tell you that a lot of these mothers, they feel like they're victims in this whole process too, because, the abortion industry was big business. I mean, for Planned Parenthood, it's big business, billions of dollars. And there's no way of getting around that.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's laws coming down the road, like Sam says, about penalizing mothers that might want to travel out of Texas to maybe a different state, that is allowing them to take care of, any issues that they might have at some point in the future.
So what do you guys think about the like Dick's Sporting Goods was a big one, and there was a couple of more companies, a bunch of them actually, that were going to pay your
Travel costs.
travel expenses and everything to go to another state to get an abortion. My thought on that is, I hope these employees bleed them dry. I hope they come in with a positive pregnancy test once every 3 months and take their $4,000 to $5,000 vacations to California or Hawaii and bleed them dry. I think that would serve them right for stepping into this minefield. So bleed them dry. Come in with a positive pregnancy test every 3 months. Take your time off. Because, I mean, the cynical side of me would say, yeah, they'd rather pay $4,000 for an abortion than pay for, maternity leave, right? Because it's a lot more expensive for an employee to go on a maternity leave than it would be to go have a procedure done. I mean, that's super cynical, but I mean, you hope they're trying to err on the side of, social justice and protecting the woman's right. But my advice to these employees would be bleed them dry. Dick's Sporting Goods, bleed them dry.
Oh, Bryan, love it.
Yeah, my thought that was when I saw that was that they would want employees to work there for their good health insurance benefits and other benefits as opposed to bleeding them dry.
Think about it. If you could get a 2 or 3 vacations for $4,000 to Hawaii every year, why wouldn't you do it? I mean, you could probably theoretically get away with, a positive pregnancy test, 3 or 4 times in a year?
Bryan wants us to turn into The Handmaid's Tale, man. He's wanting to the country divide itself, have a lot.
Whatever. No, I don't either. I think that's silliness. I mean, honestly, I think that's silliness. I mean, people have choices. People make choices. People make choices in life. They make choices to have children or engage in activity that has children. And look, on the other side of that coin, I'm okay with them. If there's a way we can configure in our society right now to have dads pay child support before children are born, if it can be confirmed that they're the father, I'm totally fine with that too. I'm totally fine with, if obviously if it takes 2 people to create a child, and that it comes down on the responsibility on both.
In vitro DNA testing.
I mean, they do it. I mean, you
involuntary by court order. Come on, brother.
No, they do. They do DNA testing. They do. I'm not going to say they do it all the time, but it can be done in utero. But I mean, even if they get the money afterward, I'm okay with that too if they retroactively apply it.
But let me ask you this. Let's flip that. So I'm dad. She's like, you're not dad. I said, I feel like I'm dad. I want to have a test. She's like, you can't have a test. I'm going to go get a court order that entitles me to a test because I'm willing to pay support. Then they go through the whole process. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? So that's the slope that we're on in relation to a woman's body. I don't know that it's right. I have a daughter. I have sisters, a wife, obviously.
Versus what?
And I would just tell you, if somebody came up and said, hey, you know what? Yeah, we had consensual sex. I think she's pregnant. I want to make sure that there's a temporary restraining order against her traveling outside of the state so that she can't have an abortion or take any kind of medication. 2, I want as soon as possible, reasonably possible, I want an in vitro DNA test to prove that I'm father. I think that's extremely invasive, but it's absolutely reasonably applicable. You can reason that logic out based on the situation that we have, at least in the state of Texas. And in Texas, there are with this process and supporting it. I mean, it's going to be a felony, and if you think that people like, Dan Patrick or, our Governor Abbott aren't going to support people who want to chase that down, they're absolutely individuals who believe that they're in the right. And I don't know that they are or they aren't. I'm just telling you that legally as an attorney, we're setting up our system to absolutely be engaged across the board, across states, in the federal level about these types of issues, I think, going forward.
The difference is in states, not a federal government telling me exactly how I have to behave. That's the difference. That's the purpose of the separation of powers, is so that states can make their own laws. Hey, if you don't like the state representatives making those laws, you can vote them out. Vote them out and get the guys you want, guys or ladies that you want to make your laws, the ones that you want. the point is, I don't know. Those seems like super slippery slopes to me that um everybody's complaining that, oh well, men don't have to pay support. I mean, I'm totally okay with men paying support. They're engaging in the activity too that could reasonably procreate a child. So people need to take more personal responsibility in this society, and I don't know that they do. um you know it's that's guess a knock on society, but at the same time.
What do you think, Nida?
My thoughts are that states are still government. States making laws about women's bodies is still government. It's a governmental entity. I don't know of any laws that tell men what to do with their bodies. I mean, I understand that women carry fetuses and whatnot, but at the same time, part of that is still a woman's body, and there are slippery slopes. Like, I don't want any in vitro DNA testing for my baby. Like, what if I'm pregnant and that's potentially harmful for a baby that I'm carrying? And then down the road, what if something happens and, say, the state that I'm living in, unfortunately, is a red state when it comes to making those types of laws. Yes, I can vote to try to get them out, but at the same time, it's a red state, regardless of which way I vote, whether it's independent or Democratic or Republican. I'm pretty sure a Republican's going to be voted back in, especially my state representative for the most part.
Yeah, you're definitely in a solid red county where you guys are at.
Not if
sure.
you believe, not if you believe Beto's campaign literature.
Well, I know you're voting for Beto O'Rourke, Bryan. I know that I've seen that bumper sticker on your back, the back of your car.
I'm a Beto male, that's for sure. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
but no, I mean, look, it's a controversial decision, and I respect everybody's opinion. I understand the uniqueness of the decision, and I understand the woman's side of it with respect to, yes, I do believe they should have bodily autonomy. I can separate the bodily autonomy, argument from the human life argument as well. So, and I don't claim to have great answers for this or anything like that, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but at the same time, my position on it is I do believe that's a life, and I do believe that as a life that's worthy of protection. I mean, 62 million abortions is way too much for a country. One thing I thought that was very interesting is, speaking of celebrities, since we always like to tie celebrities back into this, Justin Timberlake and who's the lady that the love of his life that Justin's dating now?
Oh, Jessica Biel.
Jessica Biel. Yeah, they were over in France, and they were posting pictures after the Roe v. Wade decision came down, and they were talking about how glad we could be in a country where they still respect women's rights or something like that, and they're holding up croissants and there's the Eiffel Tower or whatever. And I'm like, do you not read the room at all, you morons? They have a 14-week ban on abortion in France. So like the law for the country is 14 weeks, no abortion after 14 weeks. So, read the room a little bit. I mean, that law is more restrictive than what, 13 states here. So, yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Never miss a moment to go on Instagram and throw out some
increase your brand. Nothing like increasing your brand. Well, no, I do. I think that the court, they've had a lot of big issues in front of them for a long time. This is one of them, but I think we're going to see quite a bit more. This clearly is going to be a very active Supreme Court. I think we've had a Supreme Court over the last probably 3 decades that, yeah, they've had some landmark decisions, but they've been fairly reserved as far as touching these types of.
Oh yeah, they've skirted this issue like what, 3 or 4 times. They've kicked the can down the road. Their middle of the road position was always to go down and just rule on that one abortion law of that particular state, or just rule on one aspect of that law, and they've kicked that can down the road 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, I think we're going to see them touch on gun rights. I think that we're going to see them.
Was there? Really, I'm missing another decision that they made right before the Roe v. Wade one. I know that one took up. What was it? There was a controversial environmental opinion.
Where it was basically that the EPA doesn't have the power to be able to dictate policy for states. So they basically stripped all the teeth out of the EPA in relation to the oil industry, drilling, fracking, because they had all these policies that basically were like laws, and they're like, you don't have the ability to pass a law, you're not Congress. And it's an executive overreach for an agency that would fall to the executive branch to be able to make those kinds of determinations that would have the effect of a law.
That's always been an interesting argument for me since law school, just because of the idea was the law is always implemented by the executive. The executive always enforces the law, right? So the executive authority that was set up the EPA to provide the guidelines based on the Clean Air Act or whatever law was passed by Congress to regulate that stuff. So that regulation was supposed to be in there. But I guess the argument is that's judicial overreach when they regulate it too much, or
well, basically what they were, so they basically, so the law can say, here's what you do. Then the executive branch can set up an agency that says, hey, enforce this law, because it's the law. What was happening though was these agencies were creating policies. It's like sending, like an OAG sending out a policy letter that says, hey, here's a policy opinion. It has the effect of law. And so that's what they were doing to try to skirt around policy. So they could come in and say, like coal, they would say, hey, we have this new policy where coal can't be transported by rail, anything other than rail. And since you're not on a rail line, you can't export coal. So coal can't be, harvested in this part of the country. So that policy would have the effect of a law, right? Banning, coal mining in that area. Even though a law wasn't passed, it was just an agency coming out and saying, hey, here's a policy that we're going to put into effect that's going to have the effect of law. And so it was kind of that type of ruling.
Because I think in the next term, you're going to see probably a campaign voting rights case is probably going to come before it. I think of a
gerrymandering. Yeah, I think they're finally going to try to settle gerrymandering. That'll be interesting with the court the way it's set up. I think
campaign funding case most likely. Gun case, like you said. I think there was an expanded gun rights case though in this last go round.
Well, it's really coming
the New York. It was the New York gun law. That's what it was. It was the New York gun case.
Where you can carry a gun anywhere.
Because I think the rub on that was New York had a law where they would approve a permit for you to carry a gun, but they just never approved any permits. You could never provide enough paperwork or background checks. They were basically using bureaucracy to basically have a gun, ban.
A concealed gun ban.
Right. So I think that was the rub on that one. But that's another one that's a huge issue because of the massive number of school shootings that we've had recently. That's another big issue because rightly or wrongly, kids are getting access to these guns and they are going to schools and shooting them up, whether you can blame the parents, whether you can blame faulty issues with law enforcement not reacting swiftly enough or whatever. Kids are still getting access to guns and they are shooting people in schools, and that's a problem. And obviously nobody sends their kid to school to get shot. So how do we combat that as a society? It's becoming a societal problem as opposed to more than I don't know. It's from what I understand, most of these cases fell outside of the the current gun laws we have on the books. So I don't know.
Like you see the Uvalde school shooting, and then like just down the pipeline is now this gun law that allows you to carry guns whenever you want. And I guess I can see both arguments. Like if you have it, you can maybe use it to protect, but at the same time, if you just have them out, then that potentially also means more access to guns for kids to get access to as well, which is a scary thought.
Right. One of the cases was the Chicago kid who did the shooting recently, that's parents were supplying the guns, or to me that's
they signed off on one of them.
So to me that's probably a parents need to be prosecuted kind of situation. This Uvalde shooter shot his mom first before he went to the school and shot up the school. I know the law enforcement didn't react. I know there's a big failure on law enforcement on that one because of the procedures for active shooter situations. But at the same time, the kid got access to a gun. He obviously was a huge red flag based on social media postings and things like that. And then he was able to do a lot of damage, kill a lot of kids that, like I said, people don't send their kids to school to be shot.
Well, the other
Well, I
scary
mean,
thing, potentially like people having access to guns that may not be mentally stable. And those people don't need to have access to guns because a lot of these issues are caused by those types of people that need some help. That, a gun is obviously a very dangerous weapon that should be handled very safely, and anyone needs to handle it safely. So especially those people, it's just a scary situation for everyone that just comes around them or are in contact with them.
So
yeah, I think that, it's one of those issues, all these issues that the courts are dealing with. I think as a lawyer, you always think when you go to law school and you start in this practice, like, hey, wouldn't it be amazing if someday at the end of my career, I'm sitting on the highest court in the land? Maybe some people dream that. I think obviously, I think we all at least have revered the court and the positions that they're in. But I've always, I got to meet a couple of Supreme Court justices when we were in law school, Bryan, that came to our law school and spoke. And I would tell you that was one of the things that, both of the justices referenced in their speeches to the classes, to the law students, was the gravity of the decisions that they make, the gravity of the issues that they wrestle with day in and day out. It's not something like, any judge makes a decision that's going to affect people's lives every day, whether you're a district court judge, a freaking municipal judge, it doesn't matter. But at the highest land, at the highest court, you're making decisions that impact the nation at large, millions of people. And, what we've just talked about in this few minutes, these issues, you scratch on these issues, and there's so many layers. They're so deep. They're so complicated. They're intrinsically unsolvable, in my opinion. And when we look to the law to say that it is going to be the resolution to this problem, I think that's the fundamental fallacy in what we're trying to accomplish as people. You can't look to the court and say, solve all of our problems, because you are wise ones who are just people in robes who are highly educated. You guys know the answers to all the questions. They don't. And to sit there and say that, hey, you know what? It's gun control. It's automatic weapons. It's handguns. It's certain types of ammunition. No. It's healthcare. It's mental, this mental, care crisis that this country is in right now, or it's lack of resources for indigent, or it's, whatever, it's counseling services that are unavailable in most communities, or it's the lack of parenting resources to teach people how to be good parents. Like, all these things are, part of these problems that we're talking about across the board. And in my opinion, when we look to the courts, when we look to the law to say, you guys can solve all these problems, I think as lawyers, I feel like we experience these every day. And from my opinion, we all three of us have had these conversations. I cannot solve the problems of the world, not even the problems of the person. What I can do is try to dig you out of the hole that you dug yourself. I can try to show you a pathway. I can try to help you with answers that may potentially get you to a better place. But if you choose not to do them, the law can't solve them for you. And I think that's the crux of what we're struggling with as a society right now. And that's what makes these issues that the court's struggling with and that we're all struggling with in this society so complicated and difficult. I don't know if there's an answer. I don't have it, but I tell you that's what makes it hard.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a good solution. I mean, I respect the rights to, the right to own a gun. I understand the Constitution, and I, believe we live in a free society, but I also have two children and I don't want shot in a school,
Yeah.
So by some other kid whose, parents, have been absent for years and years, or whatever the case may be, there's some sort of mental health. Normally, most of the patterns of these school shooters are eerily similar, to outcasts of society, on the fringes, lack of parental involvement, lack, run-ins with the law possibly, or just kind of living on the fringes of life. And you don't see Mr. Popular or Mrs. High School Homecoming Queen or whatever shooting up the school. You see, the kid who's got the mental instability issues or the terrible home life or whatever. Those those are the things that happen. So what is it? More mental health services? I mean, that's not something a court's going to be able to decide. I mean, all the Supreme Court can decide is, okay, this particular gun case is in front of me that says, you know, can people apply and go through the stuff and get a concealed carry license if they're in a free society? And I have to argue, yes, they can. If they can, if they can pass and you shouldn't make it the government shouldn't necessarily infringe on your ability to do that. But at the same time, I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to some age restrictions and things like that. If they wanted to increase age restrictions on owning certain weapons and things like that, I don't know that that's not a bad thing. The problem with it is if you've got I think the biggest problem is the accessibility. The gun makes it easier for them to accomplish a deadly and destructive task. I think if a crazy kid wanted to drive a car into the school and try to kill a bunch of students by driving a car through the side of the building, they would maybe try to do that. The gun just unfortunately makes it easier and gets them a lot of notoriety. And if they have easy access to that, then it's a problem. So I'm not here to offer any solutions. Unfortunately, I don't know that there is ones. I mean, every case, like you said, every case is individually different. We can possibly help an individual case or an individual, situation, but you're never going to craft a gun law or have you're having no gun law that's going to cover all situations that could possibly arise. I mean, there was all this stuff I'm hearing about the Uvalde case. There's, none of the protocols were followed in terms of keeping the school locked down, things like that. The lockdown didn't occur properly. The police didn't respond accordingly, and as a result, there may have been more loss of life as a result of that. Versus another school shooting that you maybe don't hear anything about, where they get the shooter before he comes into school.
Or even better, they catch him before he goes to shoot somebody, right? Because a counselor catches it, a teacher catches it. They see that he's getting bullied at school. All these things, there's so many factors that play into that story, Brian. I agree with you. It's super complicated.
The problem is, can you go outside? I mean, the problem is some of the proposals on the gun laws that I've seen are, if you have an ex-wife or an ex-husband that says you're a risk factor, then they can preclude you from owning a gun. And you may just have a crappy ex-wife or an ex-husband, that you don't like. So I don't know that there's any easy solutions to it. I don't know.
And there aren't. And the law, to look to the law to say, like, solve it for us, I think is a mistake on the part of our society. It's going to take way more than that. It's like this comprehensive plan that we can't all agree on. Everybody's going to point a finger. It's like that, it's not that whole saying, you remember, like, who could have done it? Anyone, but nobody did it. And so, that whole saying where you go through like everybody, anybody, but it was nobody that did it. Well, freaking nobody's a jackass, man. Nobody's the person in the society that's freaking doing everything. Nobody's doing it. And until somebody steps up to look at it, and we can agree,
every possible reasonable explanation for why school shootings occur, from violent video games and TV to non-responsive
anti-Reagan, baby,
to medication, to society, to crazy, to everything you can think of has been an explanation.
Oh, hormones in milk, dude. Too many hormones in milk. Yeah, I mean, like, come on. It's like, what? I love milk.
However, I do think that it's, banning guns, I don't think is the answer. I don't think guns walk into schools and shoot people. It's people that walk into school and shoot people. So, I think, you see videos of people driving cars into crowds of people and things like that. So if people are hell bent on destruction, they're going to find a way to kill people. Unfortunately, whether they use their car, they use a fertilizer bomb like in Oklahoma City, or they, do
the Boston Marathon bombing. He was using a pressure cooker, and
the guy that killed they have a anti-gun law in Japan, and the guy that killed the former
prime minister,
he made a gun. He made a homemade gun and used it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't hear about that one. Yeah, I think it's a vicious cycle. I mean, like, I think that's part of democracy. Like, you have your choice whether you believe in counseling, you don't believe in counseling. It's like the way you're raised and what you believe in as a family and your upbringing and all that has a play in it. And I don't think we can solve all those problems, or the ability to think for yourself and what you think is in your best interest and your child's best interest. And if you, if you feel like your child has some kind of mental disability or needs some counseling or anything like that, do you want to put them in counseling or put her in counseling? And if you don't want to, then potential risks. And if you do, then, how does that go? And, you can't flag, I think, all those things when someone's trying to buy a gun.
Right.
I don't think you have to put all that stuff. So it's difficult how you craft gun laws and who's allowed to buy a gun. At the same time, Bryan, what you were mentioning was some of the things that you've seen as far as if your ex-husband or ex-wife would think if you're crazy. I guess that would, it seems kind of extreme, but at the same time, I guess it kind of shows, does someone think you have a tendency to be violent? And if that's the case, it may not be your perception, but it might be somebody else's perception about
Right,
that.
and you may be a law-abiding citizen, and your ex doesn't like you and has a bone to pick. I mean, we see that all the time. I mean, I had a case one time where I had 135 guns in my office because this guy never had a criminal record his entire life. He was a gun collector, and we had to store 135 guns in our office because wife said he had a mental health problem, and the judge wanted to be sure. I mean, granted, he got due process. He got an ability to have a hearing. He eventually got his guns back. But for about a 4 or 5 month period of time, we had 135 guns in my office because judge ordered him out. He ordered him to have possession of no firearms. Granted, he got due process. He got a hearing. He got an ability to set the record straight. Red flag gun laws, don't necessarily do that. And like I said, I guess it's like the terrorist watch list. They have the tendency to potentially be, misused or wrongly allocated or whatever.
Government, baby. So that's what's going to fix everything is government. More government, Bryan. Come on. I'm with you. I think everybody has a valid point to this, and I think that that's my whole thing is I just think it's beyond the complexity of the law to be able to answer all the questions. It's going to require something way more comprehensive as a society that we're going to have to, and it's across the board, but that's what's in front of the court. So to kind of bring us full circle, right? The Supreme Court has all those kinds of issues in front of them. And we now have a court that is very active, a court that has decided that, hey, you know what? We've been waiting to be fearless and the day has come. So it's going to be just an interesting journey with this new court to see kind of where they take us and what else they decide to tackle.
We could have 16 justices on it or something like that, right? I mean,
that's
the other thing that's been floated around, court packing.
That's never going to happen, man. Come on, that's never going to happen. No way. But I hear you. It's just a crazy time in the world, is it not, guys? I mean, like, it just seems like everybody is taking a solid dose of crazy, and we just need that to kind of tone down a little bit and see.
Well, I read somewhere they said that there was a potential sociological experiment that you could do, like get another cell phone, get another iPhone or whatever, an Android, whatever you want. Don't bring it home. Like only use it at a coffee shop or somewhere where you can get free internet access, but create profiles of yourself completely the opposite of what your viewpoints are on social media, and see the kind of news filters that come through that phone. So like if you're on the right and you create a phone, I haven't done this experiment myself, but if you create a phone that has all leftist stuff, like, all stuff on the left, all your news is going to be tailored to the left side of the political spectrum. So you're only going to be in the echo chamber of getting all my news from the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever the left-leaning stuff there is out there, MSNBC, NBC, all that stuff. Versus if you have one on the right, you're going to get all the right-wing sources from the way that these apps set up these algorithms. So I think the echo chamber thing is a huge problem because nobody actually listens to the other side's point of view. They only listen to their own echo chamber and whatever their side's telling them, whatever their side's patting them on the back and telling them that they're right about. And everybody's guilty of it. Everybody follows that kind of thing. I've tried to be discerning with my news. I try to read the New York Times as much as I read anything that's on the right. But am I guilty of it? Sure, everybody is. I mean, everybody has biases. But I thought it was interesting that the way your news is filtered to you obviously influences your positions on stuff and your opinions. And if you're only getting it from one side of the ledger versus the other side, then these two people have never even spoken but hate each other, and they have diametrically opposed political views, and they don't even know what the other person's point is. So nobody listens to the other person's point. There's some of these issues don't have common ground. I would agree with that. Some of them are very, very hard issues. I think with the common ground is getting less and less as we get more polarized, but nobody even listens to the other side's point of view anymore either. We're living in crazy times.
Crazy times. I don't remember this kind of stuff happening when I was a kid, but then, I mean, even your phone, like, I guess conversations that you have with people and just things that you search and look up, those things start showing up on your phone as ads or different things. Right. So your phone just facilitates what you're thinking or what you're talking to other people about, which is ridiculous.
But the scary thing about that is you don't get exposure to any other viewpoint other than what and then that just builds upon itself and builds upon itself. And then pretty soon you have no idea what the other side's thought on is. And then I think, because look, if you want to go out there and you find a website where you can think everybody on the right is crazy, fascist trying to take over the world, you can go find that. And if you want to go on the right and find somebody on the left that everybody on the left is a communist and they're crazy hell-bent on world domination, you can find that too. And you can find only sources that cater to that on both sides without ever even hearing the other side's point of view. And we live in a very, very, very polarized society right now. And I don't, I don't think that anybody in the current political class is really helping us. There's no middle ground to be found. The middle ground people are called sellouts and whatever else, and say they're betraying their party because they found middle ground with the other side, and I don't know.
Yeah.
All things we'll be dealing with on our next podcast. The art of compromise.
Yes, so we'll have to hit millennial divorces and everything like that on the next podcast because we kind of ran.
Yeah, we definitely need. We definitely need to talk about the millennials because I have a lot to say about them. I have a couple in my house.
Right. So thank you guys for your time. I always like these discussions. I'm glad we have Nida on. I'm glad Nida can provide a different point of view. I think that's tremendously helpful.
Some intelligence to the conversation finally.
I just think anybody that can provide a different perspective is going to be good for us. I mean, it's going to provide, anybody that get us thinking about difficult issues. I mean, there's no easy solutions. So thank you, Nida.
True that, brother.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
We don't always agree, but we can always part as friends. So
always.
We will catch you guys next time on the flip side.